Silver hit over $48 an ounce yesterday, down to like 47 something today. It's off a buck or whatever it is. And I like to say that 48 years ago, when I was a baby broker, silver hit around $48, $49 an ounce. But it was for entirely different reasons. Today, silver, gold, Swiss franc, and crypto, we'll say the Bitcoin, are considered alternative currencies, and in this case, alternative to the dollar, okay? In the sense of where do I put my money? And right now, with all the sovereign debt getting hit around the world, people are looking for a safe haven. But back in the 80s, it was totally different. There's these two brothers, they were called the Hunt brothers, and they were billionaire oilmen out of Texas. So they say here that the Hunt brothers felt that inflation, and remember, we're in an inflationary environment in those days, stagflation at the end, and we weren't at 1982 when we started to deflate all the way until 2019, okay? So we were coming at the end of a 30-year inflationary cycle. They felt that their dollar was going to continue to go down. They want to protect their wealth through by not having it inflate away. So they didn't like gold. They thought it was too expensive, but they saw silver as undervalued and began accumulating vast amounts and through future contracts. Critical point. So I'm mixing articles here because I'm trying to tell a story. So they say they chose to do things different. They opted for delivery of the silver rather than cashing out their contracts. So in other words, they were buying derivative contracts. And instead of cashing out, they said, no, give us the physical silver. Okay. So that created a shortage in the market, less silver available, and prices started to rise fast. And the prices soared from 11 to $50 an ounce. And the brothers ran out of cash to buy more silver. But that didn't slow them down. What they did was is they were oil men, so they went to the Middle East and they said, hey, look, we're doing this, we're buying silver, do you want to join us? And the Middle East oil people said, yes, we're in. And so up went silver again, and they had more and more money in their pockets to buy more and more silver, okay? And the short sellers had borrowed silver and sold it at the current price, expecting it to buy it back later at lower prices, obviously. Okay. But they started to continue to climb. And these short sellers had to cover their positions, thereby increasing the price. All right. In the end, they owned 200 million ounces of silver at the peak, which is worth then around $4.5 billion and around $15 billion in today's money. So now I'm over in perplexity. Okay. And so when the second part, we just went over the first part through the article, which I will post to the video. Okay. Um, what they said was they insisted on physical delivery for their futures rather than cash settlement, reducing market supply. Their leverage, though, made them vulnerable to price drops. So now the regulators started to come in and they were like, hey, the US government was not pleased because the Middle East investors were involved. And you remember we did a couple of videos before saying about how liquidity, negative liquidity events, presage a market decline. Same thing here. The U.S. government was still mad at the Middle East for when the oil prices went from $30 to $150, and we invented the petrodollars. It caused all kinds of issues in those days. Okay, so then the regulator stepped in. The new rules made it harder to buy silver futures on margin. In fact, as they said, you had to pay cash. All right, so you couldn't buy silver on margin. And so they couldn't buy as much as they did before. So the short sellers continued to put more bets on. So as they began to find themselves trapped and the prices began to drop, brokers required the Hunt brothers commit more money, margin, right? And they were able to do that. However, read the line, the Federal Reserve soon barred banks from lending for speculative purposes, i.e. silver, all right? And with no more credit available, and the Middle East backing off because they sent over whoever and said, stop buying silver, the Hunt brothers couldn't meet their obligation. And so on March 27, 1980, known as Silver Thursday, they missed their first due obligation, and panic spread, and silver prices crashed to $11 an ounce. and the Hunt brothers lost billions. And in fact, has anybody other than someone my age even ever heard of the Hunt brothers? So Silver Thursday was huge. Trust me. Now, I was a baby broker. I had no concept of the markets. I had no concept of the plumbing of the financial world. I had no idea what was going on. And frankly, in those days, I was totally ignorant to what was going on. Okay. And so, but as you can see, they drove up the price in by 400% in just 2 months. And 2 months later, it reversed itself because of what the government did. And you can see here by this chart that it went right up and then right down. It was, I guess, trying to corner the market, market manipulation. And the government stepped in. Now, again, I don't know why they stepped in. Um, was it, I mean, what do you think? Was it manipulation because they said, here, we're buying all these futures and we want physical delivery? It seems to me that the government changed the rules. One, they first couldn't use margin, then the banks couldn't lend them any money for speculative purposes, and so thereby silver collapsed. So when we look at it today, we're looking at a different situation. Gold, silver, Swiss franc, and crypto, Bitcoin, are moving up as alternative currencies. I don't know if anyone saw the other day that JP Morgan came out with a new trade, which they call the debasement trade, which is basically people moving into the four alternatives away from what they say is the dollar. But I would argue it's all the sovereigns. And we know that because look at the long term sovereign debt. All of them are going down in price and up in yield. And so now your sovereign debt isn't safe. And you have to remember something. Not everyone's saying, let me sell my sovereign debt and let me go buy the stock market. Everyone's in the stock market, but everyone owns a lot of sovereign debt. And so thereby, um, they are looking for a safe haven out of the way of what's going on. So this is a reminder, in my personal opinion, that the metals are a currency play. Okay. I know people think it's inflation, and the reason, and there is a good reason why they think it's inflation, because when you debase your currencies, what do? They go down. That means you're printing money, issuing debt, whatever, and the currency goes down. The downward move on the currency is inflationary. And so people tend to think of the metals as an inflationary play when actually you should only watch the currencies. If people don't trust the currencies, that's when they run gold and silver and the Swiss franc and now crypto or Bitcoin, excuse me. All right. So here we are. I'm not judging if the government did the right thing back in 1980. The discussion of what is market manipulation we can have. Please comment. But remember something. It was I think it was in the 30s that we pegged gold at 35 dollars an ounce, made it illegal to hold, and bought it all back from the U.S. citizen. So, I mean, the government steps in when they're protecting themselves, and they don't care who they hurt. All right. So now with Takachi in Japan, and what we thought would happen happened immediately. I mean, she hasn't even announced her plan yet. The yen is down; it's like 151 something now. Their yields are up. Their 40-year went to an all-time high, and France is looking for their sixth PM in 2 years, and it looked like Macron may fall, and their whole budget is messed up, and the French are messing up the UK, which is messing up the euro. And so people are saying, where do we go? And so my opinion is gold and silver are still looked upon as a safe haven. The Swiss franc is over. You can't, too small, negative interest rates, it's done. And then you got Bitcoin, which went to an all time high, I think. It is struggling there for a while. But tell me, what do you think? Is it going to be Bitcoin? I don't think so. But what do you think? Thanks for following and